I opened the letter expecting another bill, maybe a delivery notice. What I found instead stopped my heart cold. It was a legal notice confirming the sale of my home, the house my late husband and I had built from the ground up, where every tile, every window frame carried a memory. Sold, and not by me. It didn't take long to trace the betrayal. My son's fiancée, Amanda, smiling, polished, always too sweet, had filed forged documents with my son's power of attorney. And my son? He claimed ignorance, said he didn't know. But the wedding, plans had grown lavish overnight, hadn't they? A honeymoon in Santorini, a new Tesla in their driveway. He thought I'd roll over, that I'd let the house go and attend their wedding with a forced smile and a polite gift card. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. I may have lost my home, but I wasn't about to lose my dignity. And in the end, they'd learn the price of betrayal doesn't come in dollars. It comes in everything you thought you could keep hidden. The house on Sycamore Lane wasn't just where I lived. It was my life's anchor. My husband, George, and I bought it in 1986, back when interest rates were sky high and we had nothing but a shared dream and second-hand furniture. We raised our son Nathan in that home, painted his nursery yellow before we even knew he was a boy. Watched him learn to walk on those scuffed hardwood floors. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. Paid off with years of sacrifice and steady work. After George passed in 2015, the house became my refuge. I tended the garden the way he used to, sat on the porch with a mug of tea, listening to wind chimes we picked out together at a roadside market in Vermont. The memories in that house weren't just sentimental, they were sacred. When Nathan got engaged to Amanda, I welcomed her with open arms. She was charming, ambitious, always bringing over little gifts or offering to help with errands. I never imagined she was the kind of person who smiled while sharpening the knife behind her back. But now, looking back, the signs were there. Too much interest in my paperwork, too many questions about long-term plans and property titles. Still, I wanted to believe she loved my son for who he was, not what he stood to inherit. I thought, the house would one day be his. Not like this. Not stolen out from under me before the wedding flowers were even ordered. Nathan had always been a good boy, bright, soft-spoken, respectful. After George passed, we leaned on each other. I never pushed him to stay, never guilted him into visiting, but he did. Sunday dinners, birthday calls, he brought me flowers. On the anniversary of George's death, every year without fail. That kind of steadiness builds a mother's trust like nothing else can. So when he met Amanda, I watched him come alive in ways I hadn't seen in years. She was polished, confident, with the kind of charm that turned heads at family gatherings. Nathan looked at her like she was a revelation, and I wanted to believe it was love. I welcomed her into our lives with open arms, even when something in my gut tensed every time she smiled too wide or asked one too many questions about my finances. Amanda started coming around more often. She offered to help me organize things, bills, property records, the drawer where I kept old insurance papers. At first, it felt like kindness. I was getting older, after all, and she often reminded me how overwhelming paperwork can be for someone in my stage of life. Subtle, but not missed. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe she cared. Then one day Nathan came over with documents. Power of attorney, he called it. Just in case, he said. If you were ever in the hospital again like last year, this would let me help with the mortgage, the taxes, basic stuff. I hesitated, but he was my son. He wasn't asking for the house, just a legal safety net. I signed. The paperwork went into a folder I never looked at again. The wedding plans began soon after, elegant, expensive, filled with things I knew my son couldn't afford on his own. Custom suits, destination invitations, a 5-figure florist. I asked gently once, "Is Amanda's family contributing?" He smiled sheepishly. "They're helping a little." I left it at that. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday. Afternoon. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside, confirmation of sale. My house. Sold. With my name listed as the previous owner. Signed by Nathan, via power of attorney. I couldn't breathe. I called him immediately. He didn't answer. Amanda picked up. "Oh, this must be a mix-up," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Don't worry, we'll fix it." Fix it? Within 2 hours, my key no longer worked in my own front door. The locks had been changed. My belongings, boxed and stored, without my knowledge, in a downtown storage unit Nathan had apparently rented, just in case Mom has trouble adjusting. That's what the clerk told me when I arrived in tears, trying to retrieve my own dishes, my husband's records, my wedding album. Nathan finally called back that night. His voice was calm, too calm. "It's just a house, Mom. You'll be better off in a condo anyway. Less stress. Amanda and I needed the equity to move forward. Think of it as your gift to us." Gift? That's when something in me broke. Not out of sorrow, but out of clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. Planned, deliberate, masked with smiles and softened language. And if they thought I'd go quietly, they didn't know me at all. The days that followed were disorienting. I stayed with my sister at first, sleeping on her pull-out couch while trying to pretend I wasn't unraveling. My home, my routine, my privacy, all gone in a matter of hours. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And worse, I couldn't stop replaying every conversation with Nathan, searching for signs, for warnings I'd ignored. But it wasn't just the loss of the house, it was the betrayal of it. The fact that my own son had signed away the deed without a shred of hesitation. Amanda had pulled the strings, yes, but Nathan had held the pen. That truth was heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I contacted a lawyer. She was kind, direct, and brutally honest. Technically, if he had power of attorney, and there's no evidence of coercion or fraud, it's legal. Morally wrong, yes. Legally, complicated. She reviewed the paperwork. "You gave him too much authority without limits." I stared at her across the desk, numb. "So I have no rights?" She sighed. "Not to the house, no. But if there's financial manipulation, asset misappropriation, we might have a case." I left her office with a weight in my chest and a fire in my stomach. I wasn't going to win the house back, that was clear, but I could still reveal what they'd done. Not for revenge, but for truth, for dignity. Amanda and Nathan were planning a massive engagement party, lavish, high profile, and attended by Amanda's well-connected family and colleagues. I knew because the invitation came in the mail, like nothing had happened, with my name still on. It addressed as mother of the groom. I smiled when I saw it, not because I was amused, but because I realized they had no idea what was coming. I reached out to an investigative accountant, quiet, discreet. I handed over what I had, emails, documents, receipts I'd found buried in my packed boxes. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even my sister. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about exposing the truth they were so desperate to hide. And if I couldn't keep the house, I would make sure they never lived comfortably in it. There's a strange kind of grief that comes with betrayal. Not loud, not dramatic. It's quiet. It settles into your bones and whispers doubts in your own voice. I found myself lying awake at night, not weeping, but staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had failed as a mother. I raised Nathan to be kind, to be fair, to be honest. And yet, he had stood beside a woman who manipulated her way into our lives and helped her walk off with everything we had built. The pain wasn't just about the house. It was what the house represented. George and I had worked our entire lives for that little patch of land. We'd celebrated birthdays there, mourned losses, and planted perennials every spring. The porch, where George read the paper every morning, the window where I once taped Nathan's school awards, the fireplace that burned through every snowstorm, it was all sacred. And Nathan gave it away, like it was a transaction. That cut deeper than any eviction notice ever could. Worse still was the silence. After our last phone call, Nathan didn't reach out. No apology, no explanation. It was as if I had been written out of his life the moment the papers were signed. And Amanda? Not a word. Not even a pretense of remorse. They posted photos of their wedding prep online like nothing had happened. New kitchen counters. "Our dream home journey begins," the caption read. My kitchen, my journey, their triumph. I questioned myself constantly. Had I been too lenient, too trusting? Was my love not enough? These thoughts circled me like vultures, until one morning my sister, who'd been quietly watching me unravel, said, "Stop grieving someone who's still breathing." That hit me square in the chest, because that's what I'd been doing, mourning a son who wasn't gone, just unreachable. But with that heartbreak came a shift. I started writing things down, not just what they did, but how it made me feel. Every legal document, every financial transaction Amanda pushed through under Nathan's signature, every dinner they shared with me while the plan was already in motion, I documented it all. With help from the accountant and my lawyer, I began piecing together a timeline. Not for court, yet, but for myself. A record of the truth, so I wouldn't doubt it when the charm and smiles returned, as they always do when people like Amanda sense consequences on the horizon. In that process, something unexpected happened. I began to feel stronger. The pain was still there, but it wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was shaping me, reminding me that quiet women are not weak, and trust once betrayed doesn't owe anyone a second chance. I didn't need Nathan to come crawling back. I needed him to see, without a doubt, who I had become because of what they did. I was no longer the woman baking lemon bars in a kitchen they now called theirs. I was the woman quietly building a case with enough weight to collapse the illusion they were so proud of. The week of the engagement party arrived, and with it came an unexpected sense of calm. Not peace exactly, but clarity. I had no intention of attending. My RSVP was silence. Instead, I spent that Saturday evening sitting in the garden behind my sister's house, sipping chamomile tea and watching the sky turn a dusky pink. The air was still, the kind that holds its breath before something shifts. That afternoon, the accountant had sent me a neatly prepared folder. Inside were detailed financial statements showing just how much of the money from the house sale had gone toward Amanda's personal debt, including a suspicious payment made to a private account. In her name only, an account my son wasn't listed on. A quiet fraud, buried under the language of love and shared futures. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was a plan. I forwarded the folder to my lawyer with a note that read, "We're ready to move forward." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was final. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up early and drove past the house. Their new car was in the driveway. A string of white balloons hung near the porch rail. Everything looked perfect, but perfection has a price, and they were about to learn that theirs was far past due. I didn't honk. I didn't knock. I just looked once more at the place I'd loved. Then I drove away, calm, clear, and quietly resolute. 2 weeks after the engagement party, Amanda was served. The papers were delivered mid-morning, just as she returned from a Pilates class, according to the process server, who later called to confirm. She signed for the envelope, likely thinking it was a wedding-related delivery, maybe a registry gift. Instead, she opened a formal notice of impending legal action, financial misrepresentation, unauthorized use of funds, and breach of fiduciary trust. I had waited long enough. Inside those documents were pages of evidence. Bank transfers to personal accounts, large purchases made under my son's name, using money that had come directly from the sale of my home. My lawyer had crafted it meticulously, calm, clinical, but sharp enough to cut through their entire narrative. Nathan's name appeared too, but not as the primary target. There was still room for him to claim ignorance. What he did with that window would say everything. The fallout was swift. By the end of the week, I got a call, not from Amanda or Nathan, but from her father. A man I'd only met once, who'd shaken my hand too firmly and spoken too loudly, as if money gave him permission to be the most important person in any room. He was irate. "You're going to ruin her reputation," he barked. "These accusations, do you have any idea what this could do to our name?" I stayed quiet until he finished. "Your daughter-in-law committed fraud," I said plainly. "And if Nathan knew, he was complicit. You want it quiet? Then make it right." There was a long pause, then a click. The following week, Nathan finally showed up. I hadn't seen him in nearly a month. He stood at my sister's front door, no longer polished or proud, just tired. His eyes were sunken, his voice was low. "Mom," he said, "I didn't know." I let him talk. He insisted Amanda had handled the finances, that he'd trusted her, that he thought the power of attorney was just a formality, something to make things easier in case of emergencies. He looked at me like the boy I'd raised, but I couldn't ignore the man he'd allowed himself to become. "You didn't ask," I said quietly. "You let her handle everything, and you turned a blind eye because it benefited you." He didn't argue. "I didn't think it would go this far," he whispered. "But it did," I said, "and you let it." Tears welled up in his eyes, but I didn't reach for him. I'd done that too many times before. Love isn't a shield against consequence. It never has been. He asked what I planned to do next. I told him the truth. "That depends on you. You fix what you can. You come clean, or you watch what happens when the truth does it for you." Amanda's family settled quickly. They paid damages in private, withdrew their backing from the wedding, and Amanda's name quietly disappeared from several business ventures. Their reputation was bruised, but salvageable. Nathan lost more. He moved out, took a leave from work. Said he needed to figure out who he was without her. I didn't say I was proud. I didn't say I was angry. I just told him, that's a start. Nathan moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment across town, not far from where he used to live before Amanda. It wasn't much, just a couch, a coffee table, and a mattress on the floor, but in some ways, it felt more honest than the life he'd been living. He began calling once a week. At first, the conversations were stiff, cautious. He'd ask how I was sleeping, how my sister was, if I needed anything. I answered without warmth, but without coldness either. I was still a mother. I just wasn't. The kind of mother who could forget so easily. Then, one day, he showed up with a box. "I went through everything," he said. "Emails, bank records. There were things I should have seen. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm not pretending anymore." Inside the box were printed statements, Amanda's handwritten notes about loan arrangements, even voice messages she'd left reminding him to just sign it and not overthink things. He wasn't trying to absolve himself. He was documenting the damage, openly. That same week, he filed a legal statement withdrawing any future claim to the house proceeds and offered a full written admission of his misuse of power of attorney. He had a lawyer draft it, signed and notarized. I didn't ask for that. But it mattered that he did it on his own. Amanda, meanwhile, had vanished from our lives entirely. Word got out that the wedding was off, the venue quietly canceled. Her family issued no public statement, only silence. And I didn't celebrate. I didn't throw it in anyone's face. Instead, I sat in my sister's kitchen with a cup of tea, holding the signed document from my son, and breathed. It wasn't justice in the way the movies show it. No courtroom speech, no grand apology. It was quieter, harder, more human. But it was also the beginning of something that might one day, maybe, grow into repair. Not for the house, not for the past, but for the parts of us still willing to face the truth and stay standing. The house was never returned to me. That much stayed the same. The law had spoken, the documents were signed, the sale had closed. Amanda and her family had done what they set out to do, and they'd paid a price for it, privately, quietly, but paid nonetheless. The funds I received through the settlement were enough to begin again. Not to reclaim what I'd lost, but to rebuild with intention. With the help of my sister and a kind real estate agent who knew how to navigate the emotional weight of every square foot, I found a new place. Smaller, simpler. A little cottage near the outskirts of town, with a wraparound porch and a garden that had been neglected but not beyond saving. The day I signed the deed, I ran my hand across the wood banister and whispered to myself, "This one is mine." No shared ownership, no buried signatures, no smiling strangers pretending to help. I didn't invite Nathan to the housewarming, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed the space to claim something on my own, free of history. But he came anyway, weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon when the sun was low and the breeze carried the scent of lilacs from the side yard. He brought a single flat of tulips and a small card. On it, in his handwriting, it read, "For your new roots, if you ever want to let me help water them." We sat on the porch, not saying much. He looked around, his gaze landing on the flower beds, the small wind chime that clinked gently above the doorway. Then he said, "This feels like you." I smiled. "It is." He nodded, swallowing his emotion. "I've started seeing someone," he admitted after a pause. "No one is serious yet, but I told her everything, about Amanda, about the house, about how I lost my mother before she even left." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just reached over and placed my hand on his. "I didn't leave," I said, "but I needed you to find your way back, without a map I made." That was the truest part of motherhood I'd come to understand. Not the protecting, not the sacrificing, but stepping back when the hurt becomes too loud and standing still when your child finally turns around, looking for the ground again. He stayed for an hour. We drank tea. We talked about little things. The weather, a book I'd just finished, a dog he wanted to adopt. Nothing heavy, nothing grand, but it was something. That evening, as I watched him drive away, I felt the first real peace I'd known in months. The kind that doesn't come from getting even, but from getting free. My son had betrayed me, but I survived it. Not by clinging to what had been stolen, but by planting something new, something strong. Not just in soil, but in self. I never needed to take everything from him. I only needed him to see what he'd nearly lost. There's a certain clarity that only comes after loss, the kind that strips everything unnecessary away and leaves only what's real. I used to think of forgiveness as something you gave once someone earned it. But now I see it differently. Forgiveness, at least for me, wasn't a gift I gave Nathan. It was a release I gave myself. I let go of the fantasy that our love would always be enough to prevent him from falling short. I let go of the illusion that family meant safety, but I also let go of bitterness. Because carrying that meant Amanda still lived rent-free in my chest, and I refused to let her have anything else. I've learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's in the quiet decisions, the kind no one sees. Choosing to heal, choosing to begin again, choosing not to destroy, even when destruction feels earned. That's not a weakness. That's power. Nathan and I aren't what we once were. We're not back to Sunday dinners or easy laughter, but we talk, we check in. And little by little, the pieces are being rearranged, not forced into their old places, but shaped into something new, something more honest. And as for me, my new home has grown into more than a house. The garden is blooming, the porch is full of life again. I host book clubs, plant herbs in window boxes, and sleep with my doors unlocked, not because I'm naive, but because I'm no longer afraid. I was robbed of something sacred. But I was never destroyed. Because home, I've come to understand, is not where your story begins. It's where you choose to stand when everything's been taken. And I chose to stand in truth. If this story moved you, reminded you of your own quiet strength, or echoed a betrayal you once endured, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that dignity can't be stolen, and true power lies in how we choose to respond. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories of family, betrayal, and redemption, crafted for those who understand. That real courage often speaks in silence, and if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of someone else's choices, tell us in the comments how you found your way back. Your story may be the strength someone else needs to start. Again, because sometimes the greatest justice isn't revenge, it's rising, quietly, completely, and without apology.